Daf Lamed Amud Beis will begin Daf Lamed Amud Aleph right at the bottom of the Amud. We learned previously in Machlokes what is the reason for the requirement that before somebody comes into the Azara, he has to be Taival. He has to be Taival even if he is known to him that he's Tor, that it's required from him Atzvila regardless. Ben Zayma says that it's a Kal V'Chaimer. That Madach, a person is Mishanami Kaddish L'Kaidish, the Kain Gadol, he goes from one area of Kaidish to another area of Kaidish, from the Azara to the Heichal, or vice versa. He has to be Taival. Somebody who goes from Chol to Kaidish, Kal V'Chaimer, he has to be Taival. Rabbi Yehuda says that no, it's not a Kal V'Chaimer. It's in order to remind him, to cause him to think, to trigger his memory, to think and see if he was Tomei. Since he's required to be told for Chazim to the Azara, so it will trigger his memory, and if he was really Tomei, then it'll remind him of that, and then he'll refrain from coming into the Azara. Back to Gemara of my Kamiflagi. What is the nafkamina between them? Our answer is avoid the Kamiflagi. The machlokes is if after the fact he was not Taival. He went into the Azara. He did the Avodah. Is it Mechula? Is it possible? Ben Zayma Machal Avodah. According to Ben Zayma, who learns it's a Kal V'Chaimer, so therefore it's a Deraisa, and therefore it's Mechal the Avodah. The Avodah is possible. The Rabbi Yehuda Machal Avodah. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's only Exer D'Rabbanan. It's a requirement. It's a chiyuv d'Rabbanan in order to remind himself of Tumah, so it's not Machal Avodah, doesn't pass the Avodah. Right, the Gemara, Ula Ben Zayma mi Machal. Is that true? Is it true that according to Ben Zayma, that in fact it's Machal Avodah? I've Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Kain Gadol Shloi Tov V'Lo Kiddush. Kain Gadol Shloi Tov V'Lo Kiddush ben Begel L'Begel. He was not Taival, he was not Kiddush, he didn't wash his hands and feet between the changing of Begodim. He's required to, but if he didn't, or between doing one type of Avodah in one location, to Avodah in a different location, Avodah also kosher. The Avodah is kosher. Nevertheless, the Avodah is kosher. But however, Echad Kain Gadol Kain Hedjed. Shalai Kiddush Ad Ragla Shachris Va'avad Avodah also Psula. But if he did not do Kiddush Yadayim Raglaim in Shachris and he did the Avodah also Psula. The beginning of the Avodah, he has to do Kiddush Yadayim Raglaim before starting the Avodah. That's Machal Avodah. However, we see that even according to Ben Zayma, if he was not Taival, then the Avodah is kosher. So we see that according to Ben Zayma, it's not Machal Avodah. We see that even though he makes his Kal V'Chaimer, it's not Machal Avodah, so that can't be the difference between the two. Ella the Gemara says there's another nafkamina between Rabbi Yehuda and Ben Zayma. Ella the Gemara says L'meikam be'esei kamiflagi. The question is the Iver an essay by not being Taiva? The Ben Zayma koi be'esei. According to Ben Zayma, if he was not Taival, he's Iver with an essay. He's Iver an essay for not being Taival. Rashi says the essay is a Kal V'Chaimer, that a Kain Gadol is Iver be'essay k'dachsiva, Rachas es b'sar b'mayim, ulevation. It says by the Kain Gadol, it says on the way of Yom Kippur, Parshas Achrei, it says that he has to do rechitza and then put them on. Kal V'Chaimer, we learn out that when he's before he enters the Azara, that he has to be Taival. He's over the essay if he's not. But the Rabbi Yehuda, who does not darshan the Kal V'Chaimer, like the essay, he's not over the essay. He's over the Takana Rabbanan, but he's not over an essay. Frag the Gemara, Umi Isle the Rabbi Yehuda Haisvara. Does Rabbi Yehuda really hold in fact that everybody before entering the Azora has to be Taival? I Vahaltanya was talking Brisa Mitzayra Taival. A Mitzayra on the 8th day, on the last day of his Tahara, he's Taivel, Va'imid B'Shani Konar, so he's Taivel before he finishes the Tahara. He brings his Korbanos. The 8th day, he's Taivel, he stands in Shani Konar, and he stands in the Shani Konar where he puts in, he stretches in his hands, for the purification for his thumbs, he stretches in his hands into the Azara. So it says that he's on Mishan Nikar, and he does tefillah, and he's on Mishan Nikar. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, and Tzarach tefillah, Shekvar Tavel Meber. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, he does not have to be Tavel. The Mitzvah for his Tahara, so on the seventh day, after he is proclaimed to be healed from the Tzaras, on the seventh day, he's Tavel, and then he has hair of Shemesh, and therefore, he now, when he's in the eighth day, the following day, he does not need another tefillah, because he was ready to taival on the previous evening. So you see that Rabbi Yehuda holds that even though now he is entering, so to speak, the Azora, he does not have to have this other tefillah. He had the tefillah beforehand, so he does not have to have this tefillah. So you see that Rabbi Yehuda does not hold of this requirement. The Gemara says, "How taima?" No, that's not difficult, because that's what the Bryce itself says. That the reason he doesn't need it is because shikvar tavel mibeherim. It says it why he doesn't need it, because he was already tavel mibeherim. So that's why he doesn't need it. But otherwise, without this vora, you would need it. You would need it by entering the Azora, but over here it's not required because he was already tavel from the evening before. In fact, the Gemara, well, that seems to be such a davar pashut. Udaka orela, my orela. What was the havamin over here? What was the thinking over here? So why did he now bring this brisa to even ask a kasha? Gemara answers, Bishum the kavoy lemimach, because he wanted to compare it to another brisa. And the second brisa is a steer, because we have now the third brisa. So Lamaisa, this is the third. It's the second of this series, but it's the third brisa from what we started off with. The third brisa says Lishka HaMitzayroim, the Lishka, the chamber of the Mitzayroim. Why was it called the Lishka of Mitzayroim? Shesham Mitzayroim Taivlim, because that's where the Mitzayroim were Taivlim. Before they put their thumbs and toes into the Azora, that's where they were Taivlim. And over there, Rabbi Yehuda says, "Loi mitzayroim bilvad amru." He says, not only mitzayroim, ella kol adam. Everybody was taival before coming to the Azara. So we have a stira to the previous brisa where Rabbi Yehuda says that a mitzayra does not need tefillah. Here he says the mitzayra does need tefillah, and so here it's a stira to what was said before. So the Gemara says, like Hashem, how do we reconcile these two brises? The one that says the Mitzayra does not need tefillah is because he was already taival from the previous evening, as that brisa beferish says it before. She was taival beber. But this third brisa, this last brisa, is talking where he was not taival, so now he needs tefillah before entering. Well, if you're saying that this last brisa is talking where the Mitzayra was not taival, he was not taival over here, well, this tefillah that he's doing now will not be sufficient, because he needs a tefillah the Eraisa, that when he finishes the end of his Tumah, so at the end of the seventh day of Tumah, he needs a tefillah. After that, the hair of Shemesh, the setting of the sun, meaning the night has to come after the tefillah, then he's tor. The next day is when he brings his korbanos. But if he didn't have a hair of Shemesh, the setting of the sun, the nightfall after the tefillah, he's not tor. So the tefillah on the eighth day, that's not going to be matayir him in order to say he's tor, and certainly not to bring korbanos. In order to have his tahara, he has to have a hair of shemesh after the tefillah. The tefillah on the eighth day, he's not tor, and he can't bring his korbanos. So the Gemara says, it rejects that answer. We must say that both brises are talking was taival. He was taival on the seventh day. He had hair of shemesh. So now, how do we reconcile the brises? Why does one brisa say that the Mitzayra does not need tefillah? The second one says he does not, and the third one says he does. The Gemara answers, there is a difference where he had hesach hadas after the tefillah. In both cases, he had tefillah on the seventh day. He had hair of shemesh. But did he divert his attention at some time after that? Was he not focusing and concentrating and protecting himself from Tumah during that whole period of time? If he was guarding himself, if he did not have Hesach Hadas, then he does not need another tefillah. But if he had a Hesach Hadas, if he had a lapse of attention, of Shmira from his Torah, then he needs another tefillah. The Gemara, what do you mean? If he had Hesach Hadas, then it's not enough. Then he has to start the whole Torah process again. If he had Hesach Hadas, then we're afraid that he was in contact or in the same oil as a mez, and he has to start the Torah process again, and he needs a 7-day purification with Hazah on the 3rd and 7th day from the ashes of water mixed with ashes of the Mechatos. The Omer of the Soya Bar Mosan, Omer of Yechon, Hesach Hadas, or Hazah Shlishi V'Shvi. That if he had Hesach Hadas, he needs Hazah Shlishi V'Shvi. Ella, the Gemara says, either we eat it, the loy asach daita. Elamai, I'll tell you, in both cases, we're talking there was no Hesach Hadas. In both cases, he had a tefillah and there was no Hesach Hadas. V'loy kash. The Tavel al das bias mikdash. The loy Tavel al das bias mikdash. When are we saying that he does not need a tefillah on the 8th day? Is when he was taival on the 7th day, and not only was he taival, but he was taival with the das and attention that this is a tara for him to enable him to enter the Beis Hamikdash, to enter the Azor, because the tefillah that's required before entering the Azor is a tefillah with a kavanah. You have to have intent, a special kavanah that this tefillah should purify him in order to enter the Azor. So if he had that machshava, he does not need another tefillah on the 8th day. But if he did not have that machshava, he needs another tefillah on the 8th day. V'yivoy same alternatively, I'll tell you, Tanya as follows. We have to amend the final brisa, the third brisa, as follows. Loi mitzayroin amru, they did not say mitzayroin, they did not only say Mitzrayim, they said everybody, but they did not say Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim did not need a tefillah. Ella kol adam, rather kol adam. But a Mitzrayim does not need the tefillah. Mitzrayim doesn't need the tefillah because he already had the tefillah. Ravina Amar gives a different teretz. Rabbi Yehuda l'divrayim d'Rabbanan kamlo. Rabbi Yehuda was saying according to the opinion of the Tanna Kama. That's the final brisa, that's what he meant. Meaning, according to me, the Mitzayra doesn't need a tefillah because he had the tefillah from beforehand. He already had the tefillah on the previous day. But according to you, you should admit to me, you should at least admit to me, but you who do not accept the tefillah that he had beforehand, well, if that's the case, then you should agree with me that when I say that anybody who enters the Azora needs a tefillah, then therefore you who claim that the mitzvah that he had the previous day is not sufficient, and you say therefore he needs another tefillah, well, you should be minded to me that it's not only a mitzvah, therefore, it's everybody, because anybody entering the Azora should have a tefillah. Now, if you're just like you're discounting the tefillah that the Mitzvah had the previous day is not sufficient, so he needs a tefillah now on the 8th day. Well, agree with me, therefore, anybody you didn't have a tefillah previously, you need a tefillah, you have to be taiva before entering the Azor. For Rabbanim, the Rabbanan argue and say, no, Mitzvah daish betuma. The reason why Mitzvah, it's not Mitzvah, because he's been tomei. He is literally, he's stepped on the tumah. He's within his own tumah. He's been tomei for this period of time. So therefore, he's been a state of tumah. We need this tefillah before entering the Azor. Kol adam lo daish b'tumah, but other people are not steeped in their tumah. They do not require a tumah before entering the Azor. So the Ritva explains, therefore, that according to this Rabbanan and the Brisa, they argue with our Mishnah. they argue on the Tan of our Mishnah, and they hold that no, a tefillah is not required before entering the Azar. It's not an absolute requirement that anyone coming into the Azar requires a tefillah. So they argue with the Tana of our Mishnah. Should we say that the Rabbanan, who argue according to Rabbi Yehuda in the second brisa, they argue on Rabbi Yehuda, they say that the Metzora, notwithstanding the fact that he had a tefillah the day before, he does require another tefillah. Let us say that Ben Zayma Svir Lahu. Should we say that they hold like Ben Zayma, that there's a Chiv Deraisa for the tefillah? So therefore, it makes no difference that he had a tefillah the day before. There's a Kal V'Chomer, a tefillah Din Deraisa, that there's a mitzvah to be taiva before going into the Azor. Should we say that that's the Pshat? V'hai diktana mitzayra, and that's what they say, mitzayra. So if they hold like Ben Zayma, it's not particular to mitzayra, so why did they mention the case of mitzayra? That's la'yadiyach ha'kaycha de Rabbi Yehuda. That's only to show you the extent of Rabbi Yehuda, how far Rabbi Yehuda goes, that Rabbi Yehuda says that even a mitzayra, that he was someone who was Tomei, and now he's coming in for his Tara, that even he, Rabbi Yehuda says, does not require a tefillah, since he had a tefillah the day before. But perhaps we should say that Rabbanan, who say that the Mitzvah is required to be taival, it's not only Mitzvah, it's everybody, because they hold like Ben Zayma. Or perhaps they don't hold like Ben Zayma, and they don't hold that everybody that comes in is required to be taival. It's only a Mitzvah that is dayesh b'tumah, that since he was steeped in his tumah, even though he had a tefillah beforehand, he needs another tefillah, but other people don't. Amrle shayne mitzayra the dayesh b'tumah. Mitzayra is different with dayesh b'tumah. It's not that they hold like Ben Zayma.